Right, today's day 33, day 33 of Bible in 90 Days, or What's in the Bible, where we're looking through the entire story of the Bible, just summarizing verse by verse, chapter by chapter, book by book, until we get all the way to Revelation. So we started in Genesis. We're about a third of the way into the Bible now. So we've made some good progress. Today we're looking at Second Chronicles chapter 8 all the way to 23, which, as I explained a few days ago, that this is still just a recap or some extra details around the kings that were reigning over Israel and Judah. Today, most of the content is actually based on, the kings of Judah and how things started happening after Solomon, was gone. So, Second Chronicles 8, we hear this is the last bit of detail that we get about Solomon. Solomon builds extra towns, the offerings and the service that he did according to the law of Moses. So at this time, the people were following what God wanted and what God had told Moses that the people should do. Second Chronicles 9, we hear about the visit of Queen Sheba and her being very impressed at how Solomon was running things and just being impressed, overall. We hear about the wealth and the wisdom of Solomon. Then, obviously, the death of Solomon, and how his son Rehoboam succeeds him. Second Chronicles chapter 10, Rehoboam rejects some good advice, which then leads to the split, or which led to the split of Israel. So at this point, Rehoboam was the leader or the king of all of Israel, but because of this situation that ended up happening, that was ordained by God, Rehoboam finds himself with only Judah and some parts of Israel to reign over, whilst the rest of the kingdom went to a guy called Jeroboam, which we already know because we read about this before. Second Chronicles 11, as a result, because Jeroboam wasn't actually following the law of God, he wasn't doing things according to the way that God wanted it to be done. So all the priests actually made their way to Jerusalem, where Rehoboam was, because obviously Jeroboam in Israel had begun to worship idols and started his own religion and started doing all sorts of things that were not according to the law. So the people over there, some of them, the ones that wanted to still follow God and do things according to the way that God wanted them to be done, they made their way to Judah. We hear about Rehoboam's wives and his family, and how he made preparations for his son Abijah to actually to rule over. Second Chronicles 12, Rehoboam later on, after a while, I think maybe 35, I think it was in the 35th year of his reign, he strays from the Lord. So he started doing other things, not following God, etc. And then Judah was attacked by King Shishak of Egypt. Then the people repent, promptly, and in this instance they're not actually they're not attacked. Second Chronicles 13, we hear about the battle between Abijah, who was the king of Judah, and Jeroboam, the king of Israel. And Judah is said here, they won because God helped them. Second Chronicles 14, we hear about another king called Asa. He reigned, and he reigned in righteousness, so he was a good king. There was peace in his time, and we hear about all the reforms that he did in Judah. Then 1,000,000 Ethiopians actually came to make war, against Judah, but again, God intervenes, for Judah, and they won that war. Second Chronicles 15, we hear about the further reforms that Asa put into place after encouragement from Azariah, which was a prophet in that time, who came and told Asa that God would strengthen him and God would be with him as long as he continued to do what God wanted. Then we also hear that a lot more people at this time as well, from all the other tribes of Israel, moved from Israel to Judah, because they wanted to follow God and follow his commands. We then hear that the covenant was renewed to say that they would continue to follow God's laws and live according to the way that he wanted them to live. Second Chronicles 16, we hear that King Asa, king of Judah, was attacked by Baasha, who was the king of Israel. But this time around, instead of relying on God, he went and bought protection from the king of Syria, whereas before he just went to God, and God actually delivered them from the 1,000,000 Ethiopians. Then a prophet is actually sent to rebuke Asa for doing this, but then that prophet is imprisoned. Asa gets a disease in his feet, and later he dies without going to God. So it seems as if everything has started well for Asa, but at the very end, he started trying to take things into his own hands. Second Chronicles 17, Jehoshaphat. So all these kings that we're talking about, these are the kings that were reigning in Judah. We're no longer talking too much about Israel now, except for when they made war or whatever. So Jehoshaphat becomes king and follows God. We also hear about his reforms and how he tried to make things better. So in that time, the kingdom of Judah, it grew. There was peace, and he would send out teachers, into the cities to teach them about God and the law. We hear also about the priests, and that the army became bigger and bigger. Second Chronicles 18, we hear that Jehoshaphat goes to war with Ahab, as in together as an alliance. And we have a Micaiah's prophecy, which we already did, when we're looking at the kings of Israel. We then hear about the death of Ahab in this war, and how God saved Jehoshaphat. Second Chronicles 19, we hear about a prophet called Jehu, who actually goes to rebuke Jehoshaphat for all these alliances that he was making with Israel, or making alliances with people that didn't actually want to listen to what God was saying. We then hear about setting some judges in the cities to judge fairly, as well as some priests who would take care of making sure that the people knew how to follow God. Second Chronicles 20, God helps Jehoshaphat and Judah against a multitude of Ammonites and Moabites. We hear that this war was actually won because of the help of prophets and people that just went singing. So they didn't actually go with artillery or military weapons or whatever. They just went in, they just sung their hearts out, and that's how they managed to win that war. However, Jehoshaphat even continues to make more alliances with the kings of Israel. Second Chronicles 21, we just got a few more chapters for today. Jehoram reigns in sin. So the next king after Jehoshaphat was Jehoram. But instead of continuing in this way of doing things according to the way that God wanted it, he reigns in sin, and the enemies actually end up attacking Judah. We hear that at this point, Elijah the prophet, which we already read about in, I think, First or Second Kings, he writes to him and tells him not to be doing the things that he was doing, but obviously he didn't want to listen. But eventually Jehoram, because of his life of sin and how he led Judah into sin, he died a very painful death. The next king was Ahaziah, Second Chronicles 22. He also reigned in sin, and we hear about his eventual death because he was killed by Jehu. But we have already spoke about this before. Athaliah, who then kills the entire royal family. She then becomes queen, but one person from the royal family, whose name was Joash, he escaped because his sister made him escape, and he was actually groomed to be king. Second Chronicles 23, Joash is now made king by the priest Jehoiada, and they kill Athaliah. Then we hear about the good reforms that happened under Joash, because obviously Jehoiada was teaching him how to do the the right thing. So yes, today is mostly about the kings of Judah. We'll probably continue in that way, because this is some of the detail that we didn't get when we were reading First and Second Kings, because that was primarily to do with what happened with Jeroboam and all the other people that followed after Jeroboam. So tomorrow is actually our last day in Second Chronicles. Then we get into the book of Ezra, which is a continuation of the story of the Israelites when they had been exiled. So hopefully that's helpful. I'll see you guys tomorrow.